Morning, everybody. My name's Patrick, and I'm one of the librarians here at UTS Library. And in our new online environment, I'm going to be recording now a tutorial on how to access and use Zotero, which is a reference managing product. It's online, but you also download a desktop version. And Zotero basically is a way of storing your legal citations and then using a word processing software like Word, typically, to insert those citations into your Word document. It automatically creates footnotes for you in AGLC style and creates a reference list at the end for you out of those inserted footnotes. So it can save you a lot of time and hopefully reference better, but you still do need to understand a bit about how AGLC works. So I'd recommend that you still familiarise yourself with the AGLC referencing style, even if you are using Zotero to create your references. So the very first thing we need to do is go to our browser and go to Zotero's website and download the software and some other useful stuff from Zotero's website. So we'll go there now. I'm just going to share my screen with you. And we'll open up a browser window. So here's our browser. I'm just using Chrome, it doesn't really matter. And we can just Google Zotero, is probably the easiest way of finding Zotero. There it is there. So this is our Zotero website, and we're going to go and download. I already actually have downloaded Zotero on my machine here. I've got this little icon down the bottom of the screen for Zotero, but you'll need to go and click on this download button. It's free, and like a lot of these products, you get a certain amount of storage space, and as long as you don't put too much in it, then you'll be fine. Using the free version should be plenty. So you can click on this download button here. I'm in Windows, so it's recognised that I want the Zotero version for Windows. But if you're on a Mac, for example, or some other operating system, then that's your option for getting the Macintosh version. What happens, you click on the download, it downloads an installation file, which you then open up and use to install Zotero on your Mac or PC. We also recommend that you get the browser connector. I'm using Chrome, so it knows that I want the Chrome connector, but you might use Safari or some other browser, and you can get a connector for those other browsers with that link. That creates this little connector. You'll see I've got it here. That's my Zotero connector. That's useful because it can grab details off web pages and create references for you from those web pages, and that can be quite useful. Doesn't work perfectly well, so you'll have to be careful when you're using that connector and just check to see that everything's been downloaded properly, and often it isn't, and you have to do a little bit of editing of those downloaded references, but it is quite a useful feature. So I'd recommend you install that little browser connector. When you install Zotero itself, you also install in your word processing software, and we're all using Microsoft Word, it'll install what's called the Microsoft Word plugin, which is the functionality that lets you get your references out of your Zotero library once you've got your references in there, and create the references in the Word document. So that then allows you to create those footnotes and the reference list from those footnotes. So the download process for Zotero also downloads these Word plugins, they're called, that create some extra stuff in Word, which we'll see later in this tutorial. So I'll assume now that everybody's successfully downloaded both Zotero for Windows or for Mac and have installed your browser connector, either Chrome or for whatever other browser that you're using. So let's go to Zotero. You'll see it in your applications folder on a Mac or your Windows selector here on Windows. I'd recommend you pin it to your taskbar. That way you don't have to go and find it every time. You can just click on it here and open up Zotero, which I'm going to do now. So I'm just going to click on that little icon. Opens up my Zotero library, which hasn't got anything in it. Just move it down a little bit so you can see a bit better. So we need to add content to our Zotero library. We can do that through here, through this little new item icon. But before we do that, we also want to tell Zotero that we're using AGLC referencing style. So Zotero works with lots of referencing styles, but we're specifically using AGLC for law. So that lives over here. On Windows, it's under Edit and Preferences. On a Mac, you'll see there's going to be a Zotero little tab there for Zotero. So click on Zotero and Preferences. So on Windows, it's Edit Preferences. On a Mac, it's Zotero and then Preferences. You'll see a little bit different the first window you see. You'll see a lot of other styles here. I've deleted them because I don't ever use them. You can leave them there if you like. You won't see AGLC initially, so we'll just put that there in a minute. I think it's useful not to have styles in this window. This is like your favorites window that you never use. I've got APA still there because that's used at UTS. And you can have other styles there, of course, but it's nice not to have them if you don't need them because it gets a bit confusing sometimes. To add in AGLC, we click on this Get Additional Styles link down the bottom, and that allows us then to search for AGLC. So up the top here, I can drag that down a little bit somehow. You should see title search. Let me drag it down. I hope you can see. I'm just going to type in that title search box, AGLC, and it finds the 3rd edition, which was the version until a couple of years ago, and then the 4th edition, which is the most recent version, and that's been updated quite recently. So that's the one we want, the 4th edition of AGLC. So I'm going to click on that, and now it's added it into my list of references. If you want to delete them, by the way, you just select them and then use this minus button. You can get them back again by going to additional styles and bringing them back if you want to. So select and then minus to delete. Otherwise, get additional styles, and then that allows you that. So here's our AGLC style 4th edition, so that's very good. That's okay. So now we want to add our references into our library. So we'll select the library, which is the full name of your collection of references will be called My Library, and we'll click on this little button to choose what kind of reference we want to insert. Now I've got case and statute up here. You may not have that because this is the ones we've been using by default most frequently, and I've been playing around with Zotero, so I've got these up here. As you create new references of different types, you'll find that those things will appear in this favorites top. But if you don't see what you need, you click on more, and there's all these different kinds of references. All these different kinds of references there that you can create and use. One thing we don't have is a web page, because the expectation is if you want to create a web page reference, you use your browser plugin. So you go to the web page and use the browser connector, to download the details of the web page. So we'll do that. We'll do that at some point. So I'm going to choose case here. Now I accidentally chose one up before there, so I'm just going to delete that. Delete that newspaper article one that I accidentally created as well. So there's my case. You'll see this little symbol here for a case, which has got the scales of justice. Then over here, the reference type case, and then a whole bunch of empty areas where I can put my details in for that case. And there, as you'd expect, for a reported case, we have our party names. Just type them in. We don't need to put the court in, the date decided, the reporter where it's been reported in. Let's just use our abbreviation. The reporter volume. I'm making this up, by the way. That's just invented. Okay, so a reported volume, a reported first page, and generally speaking, you'll need to put a short title in if you plan to refer to a case in a document more than once, because the subsequent, as you probably know with AGLC, the subsequent citations need to refer back to the earlier ones using a short title. The rule, generally speaking, with cases is that the short title is the popular case name, if there is one, the first party name otherwise, and if the first party is the Crown, then it's the second party name. So this is just a regular case, Smith and Jones, so the first party name will be our short title. If you want to see what that looks like in AGLC, we go back to our preferences. So on Windows, it's Edit and Preferences. On a Mac, it's Zotero and then Preferences. And then you'll see on this, so this is where we were before when we selected our style. We select our style, and the Style Preview button down here gets you get to see what your references look like in that particular style. So I'll click on Style Preview. And then when it comes up, try that again, shall we? GLC, Style Preview. Okay. Why is that not working? Okay, back again. I think I got it working. I think that was just some kind of glitch. So we'll try again with that Style Preview. So click on our reference, Edit, Preferences, or Zotero Preferences on a Mac. Choose our Style Preview. So here's our Style Preview screen that should have come up before. And we just refresh. And that shows us with our selected reference back in our Zotero library what that looks like in our styles. This is one reason why it's good to delete all those ones you're not going to use, because you'll have every style that you have listed in your favorites. It'll give you what that reference looks like in that style. So I've only got 2 in my favorites, so it's only showing me AGLC and APA. So I've got my footnote reference at the top here with my short title and my full stop. And then underneath, I've got the same reference, but how it would look like in the reference list, which, as you would know, does not have a full stop in the reference list. So it gives me the footnote version and also the reference list version. I'm going to leave that window open for a minute. I'm going to go back to my library and we're going to put another case. So you would have noticed in the preview that this case has round brackets around the year. And Zotero is quite clever with those brackets around the year. So the way Zotero decides what kind of brackets is that if there's something in the reporter volume field, 67 in my case, then it thinks it needs to put round brackets around the year. But if there's nothing in that volume field, reporter volume field, then it will put square brackets around the year. So I'm going to add another case. And I'm going to do a case from the Victorian reports. From 2005, which doesn't use volume numbers. So I'm just going to put a first page and I'm going to use my short title. Actually, I might just change that. So let's pretend it's the Crown as our first party there. So in that case, the short title would be the second party, Brown. So party names, date decided, reporter. We don't have a volume number, first page number, and then our short title. And so we can now go back to I'm just using Alt-Tab to go between windows and refresh to see the new style, the new reference. And you'll see now we've got our the Crown and Brown 2005 in square brackets, no volume number, and our short title Brown following. And then there's our reference list version underneath without the full stop or the short title. This format you can use for your medium neutral citations as well. So we'll just do, for example, if we wanted to do a case from the High Court, let's suppose that's a famous Cardinal Pell appeal case. We don't use, you might think we use the court. Still easier to pretend that's the same format as a reported case field. So we'll put our court abbreviation in that reporter field. We won't put anything in the volume number, and the judgment number will go into our first page field. So that'll come across as if it was a reported judgment with the square brackets around the date decided, which I better put in. And our short title again would be, in this case, Hill, the first party. So medium neutral cases we treat like a reported case but with no volume number. So the reporter is the court abbreviation and the first page will now be the judgment number. There is another way of doing this, but it's much easier, I think, if we just use the same format for everything. So there's our Pell versus Pell and the Queen. And if we go back to our judgment, our previous screen, we can see Pell and the Queen, 2020 HCA form. The final type of case is a sneaky one. New South Wales Law Reports is an example where we need to have both the year in square brackets, but it does have occasionally volume numbers, and King's Bench reports similarly sometimes use volume numbers as well. The problem is we can't put anything in that reporter volume field because that will force the year to then be in round brackets, and we want the year to be in square brackets. So our trick is to add the volume number into the reporter field in front of the reporter abbreviation. So suppose we wanted to do a case from the New South Wales Law Reports. From say 2003. So a reporter, we would normally put New South Wales Law Reports, first page 67, say, let's make it 89. We can't put our volume number here. So if it was volume 2, for example, we just have to type it in front of the reporter name in that reporter field. And that will sneakily show us, it'll look as if it's a volume number in our citation, even though it's not coming from that reporter volume field, and that will preserve the square brackets around the year in the citation. So if we go back to our refresh screen and refresh, you'll now see that we have volume 2 appearing in front of the Law Report series, but the year is still in square brackets. So if you need to have a volume number and that the year needs to be in square brackets, you need to not put the reporter volume in the volume field, but rather add it in front of the abbreviation of the Law Report series. So that's cases. Legislation is quite simpler, so we can just use choose a statute is the name of the reference type we use for legislation down the bottom of our list here. And you'll see a little court, a little Parliament House, actually, I think that's meant to be that symbol there. So we just put our Act name in the, I'll use my favourite Act, the Crimes Act of New South Wales, 1900. We put our jurisdiction into the code field, so that's where you'd put your abbreviation for Victoria or the Commonwealth or Queensland or whatever. It's in code. The date enacted is the year of the Act being enacted, obviously, and then we can use our short title. The light's gone off in my room. A short title, which will be just a Crimes Act. So typically speaking, the short title, unless it's very, very long, in which case you can create your own short title, but generally speaking, if it's a fairly short title already, you just use the name of the act without the year as the short title. So that's enough. So we can just select that up here, go to our preview screen using Alt-Tab, and then that will show us the Crimes Act 1900 from New South Wales. That's nice and easy. And we can add other types of references here. So we've got journal article, we've got book section, which is the chapter of a book, bills. As I mentioned, we don't have web pages because the expectation is you use your browser connector to create those web page references, and various other types of references here that you would need at some time, from time to time. We can get references out of databases as well. That can be a little bit tricky because that connector is not always reliable. So we'll go into Hein Online, which is our journal article database here at the library for legal referencing, legal journal articles. So I'm just going to go back to our browser and go to UTS Library. There's our library homepage. There's our address up there. You can just Google UTS Library, and Hein Online lives under here under Find Databases. In fact, our browser connector, which is just sitting up here, isn't that great for databases generally. So it won't work, for example, for the two databases we'd really want it to work for, which would be Lexis Advance and Westlaw. So getting stuff out of those, you do have to manually type them in. You can't download using that connector. Hein Online sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Top law databases and Hein Online. You normally have to log in, as you always do for UTS online resources. So it's just your staff or student number and your UTS email password. Down a little bit. So it will log us into Hein Online, a busy Hein Online screen. As you would know, we always, or nearly always in Hein Online, when we're looking for articles, we go to our Law Journal library down here. So I'll click on that and then I'll do a search. Done a couple of searches recently. We'll just look for customary international law just as an example and search. Now sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't in terms of getting stuff into Zotero. So here's our list of articles. I'm not going to limit, normally it would be useful to limit to published in Australia, and you might want to also edit the type. In fact, you should edit the type and choose your refereed articles as well. I'm not going to do that at the moment because I'm just showing you. So we'll use this second one. So we click on the title. Now, when I was doing this earlier, this worked so that what we're going to try and do is use our connector up here. You'll see if I right click, we have an option to save to Zotero, and an option up here, save to Zotero Hein Online. So I think this is going to work. When you've got that option there, I think this is going to be really nice and create our reference for us back in Hein Online. So what we're doing is we right click, so we bring up the article, click on the title in the list there, right click up here on our browser connector, save to Zotero, and save to Zotero brackets Hein Online. So if we do, I noticed earlier this morning when I was playing around with this, occasionally you just have these two options here, web page with snapshot and web page without snapshot. They don't work really because what you'll get is it'll give you a reference to this whole web page here, which is basically just Hein Online. So you're getting it to do a reference to the Hein Online page rather than the article itself. So that doesn't work. And if that happens, you'll just have to manually type the details in, unfortunately. But when you get this save to Zotero brackets Hein Online option here, that's going to work really nicely. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to save to my library, which is the name of my Zotero library. So it's done that now. So if I go back to my Zotero library, we'll see here, move that out of the way. We've got our article here, it's put everything in the right place. Journal article, the title of the article, the author of the article. If we need to add more authors, if you're doing it manually, this plus sign lets you add more authors. Each author has to be on a separate line. First name, last name, journal name, volume, issue, page number details, and various other things. Now, as you probably know, in AGLC, we don't reference the page numbers beyond just the first page. So you do have to do a bit of editing here where you need to just get rid of those page numbers so that only the first page is being displayed here. The other thing is we don't want the URL, which would, Zotero will display that URL if there's anything in that field. So we'd also want to delete the URL because journal articles, generally speaking, we don't display URLs in AGLC. The short title we don't need to care about because in fact with articles, the short title is also always the surname of the authors. But I'm going to just delete that short title just for the sake of completeness as well. And I think it's probably, if you're deleting stuff, you might as well get rid of that short title for journal articles as well to force the system to use the author's surname as the short title. So there's a journal article from Hunt Online, so that works well. And we'll have a look at Ostly now to see if we can do the same thing in Ostly. This wasn't working when I tried it on Friday. So I'm just going to open up a new browser window here. Wasn't working on Friday, so we'll try it now and see if it works. But I'll show you how it should work. And then you can try it yourself later. So if we go into Ostly, Ostly's been a bit dodgy lately. Yeah, I don't know if it's actually going to work properly. I don't think it's going to work. So when it finally does come up and work, what you do basically is you bring up the case or the legislation. No, it's not going to work. You bring up the case or the legislation and then you use your browser connector. In Ostly, you'll find that when you bring up a case, this connector changes its symbol. So it looks like this little scales of justice symbol. And if you bring up a piece of legislation in Ostly, it'll change this little browser connector to this little Parliament House symbol that we saw for legislation. When it does that, you can then click on the link and it will download the legislation and the case very nicely and create you a reference in your law library for that piece of legislation or the case. You do then have to edit a little bit. So I think with Ostly, it'll put the details, but it puts the year up in the name of the act. And it's best if you take that out of there and move that down into this date enacted field. And with Ostly, because all the cases are in medium neutral format in Ostly, you'll get them in medium neutral, but it will put the court abbreviation up here in the court field and the first page, which I've got in, sorry, the judgment number, it'll put in this docket number field. That works okay, in fact, but just be aware that that's the other way of doing these medium neutral cases is HCA in the court field and the first page in the docket number field. Otherwise, I think it's the same. So that you'll just have to be aware that that's a little bit different in Ostly. And I'm sorry I can't show you Ostly at the moment. It's been a bit offline for a couple of days. So hopefully that will come back online. Otherwise, it's fairly simple, in fact, just to create a new case or a new statute manually as well. There's not too many things you need to fill in for these details. Okay, so let's suppose we put our references into our library and now we want to use them in our Word document. So how do we do that? Well, let's open up our Word browser, our Microsoft Word program. So here we are in Microsoft Word. Move that down a little bit. Actually, I'll move that down a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Make that slightly bigger. So when you install Zotero on your machine, it does create this tab up here in Word when you open Microsoft Word, which you won't see until the Zotero program is installed, which is our Zotero Word plugin that is mentioned in Zotero's website. And that has these functions that allow you to insert your citations into the various footnotes. So if I'm typing in, this is my thesis, first line, and I want to then cite something, I basically just put my cursor there, and I've got this add and edit citation button here, which will add a citation in if there isn't one, or it will let me edit one if there already is a citation there. So I'm going to click on that, and I just click on OK, I think here. Yeah, that's right. So the first time you do this, it's going to ask what, this is a bit, I can't really drag that down, but it's going to ask you what referencing style you want to use. So just make sure you choose AGLC at that point and then OK. And initially you get this funny little screen here, which is basically a search screen. So it says, I want to search for a reference for me. If you want to see the library itself and pick from the library, that in Zotero is called the classic view. And you can get to the classic view. Sorry, it's done it for me there. I'll just delete that and start again. You can get to that classic view using this little drop down, and that brings up the library screen. I like this better because then I get to pick my citation and click on OK. And let's try again. AGLC. And I want to move it around so I can actually see that OK button at the bottom of the screen. So then I've inserted my citation down the bottom of the screen, Jones and Williams, and you'll see that it's in the right format. So it's a square bracket citation from New South Wales Law Report, so it's got the U that way. It's just exactly as I saw in my previous screen. And here's some more. Another one. If you don't want to go through that process every time of going through this screen and you may be searching, there's my Pell and the Queen case, enter, so that then inserts it that way. There's my second case down there. You can go into your preferences, go back in Zotero, go back to my library here, edit in Windows, edit preferences, on a Mac, Zotero and preferences, back to my word process. So we've been doing really all of our work in our styles screen. We go into our word processor screen. And by the way, this has been always under this sync tab, site tab here. Under word processors, you've got this little box that says use classic add citation dialog. If we tick that button, and then OK, that means that whenever we insert a reference in our Word document, you'll get that classic view, which is the library. So if I click on here, I get to see my library without having to choose classic view every time. I prefer this because I get to see what I want to pick in. So let's put in our journal article. So down the bottom, I've got my journal article appearing. Now with pinpoints, you can just, that's just editing the citation. You can do it as you go. So for example here, if I want to pinpoint, say, to page 90 of that New South Wales Law Report, then I click on add, so I highlight the reference, add and edit. So that brings up that reference, Jones and Williams, and here's where I put in my pinpoint, say to page 90, and OK, and that then puts in my pinpoint. It knows how to put it with the comma. With that second one, because it's a medium neutral citation, the pinpoints to a paragraph number, and if you recall, paragraph numbers, pinpoints in AGLC have to be enclosed in square brackets. So when we add edit, it's not quite smart enough to know that. So I'm going to type in, say, a citation to paragraph 5 of this medium neutral judgment. I need to make sure I remember to put the page numbers in square brackets so that when my pinpoint comes through, it's got the pinpoint in square brackets. Similarly here, I might, with my journal article, I might be citing something on page 105. So I add edit, I just put my page number here, and that pops it in there. With legislation, more words. With legislation, obviously we cite to section numbers. So I'm going to do that as I go. So I put my Crimes Act in. I want to cite section 28A, for example. So I'll put that in. If we've got more than one, obviously 6 sections is SS. 28B, for example. That gives us a multiple section citation, and click on OK. So that puts in our Crimes Act, sections 28A to sections 28B for Crimes Act. Repeated citations, that's quite nicely handled using Zotero. So if I have another citation to Jones and Williams here directly underneath, we would expect that to go to IBID. So I put in a second one directly after that first one to Jones and Williams. Didn't go to IBID. Why didn't it go to IBID? Because it's expecting me to put a pinpoint into the other reference. So if I got a pinpointed reference, it's expected me to have another pinpoint here. So what I'm going to have to do is cite. So it's done it correctly in a sense. So it's putting up back to M1 there, but it should be IBID. So that's the problem is I didn't pinpoint something. So if I pinpoint, say, page 91, that will tell Zotero that actually I want to have IBID 91. So that's how you get IBID. If you've got a directly repeated one, but there's a pinpoint in the first one, you need to put a pinpoint in the second one to force it to go to IBID. If I want to put Jones and Williams later, non-consecutively, then typing, insert my next citation. So again, that's another Jones and Williams. So this is a non-consecutive repeating citation. So it knows. Now I didn't put my short title into Jones and Williams. So it puts by default the full title of the case. Correctly going back to the first footnote there. So that's an indication I need to do some editing of my citation back in my Zotero library, because the short title should be in fact just Jones. So I'll go back to my Zotero library. I'll open up Jones. See, I don't have a short title. So I put my short title, it's just Jones. Go back to my Word document. And you'll see here there's a button refresh. So when you see some mistake in your footnotes, you can change them back in your Zotero library and then use this refresh button to refresh everything. So now my short title appears up here, and in the repeated non-consecutive citation, I'm referring back to Jones. Let's supposing I put a reference to my article next. So we would expect that to just be D'Amato note up to 4. So let's put that in. So I'll just do a bit more text, and insert my journal article. Okay. And now I've got D'Amato, the author's surname, back to footnote 4. If there was more than one author, as you'd expect, it would say the 2 surnames, D'Amato and whoever the second author's surname is. So that does it very well. And what's more, if we disrupt the order of the citations by inserting another one right in the middle, it'll fix these 1s and 2s. So if I put, say, one right at the very beginning, it'll alter these 1s and 4s as it should. So it's very clever that way. So if I put in a reference to another citation right at the very beginning that we haven't used before, for example, let's use our Victorian Reports case. So there's that citation to Brown. So Jones has been moved to number 2, and our journal article's been moved from 4 to 5, and Zotero has kept track of that. So now it's referring back to number 2 and number 5. So that's a very nice feature of Zotero, that it keeps track of all these repeated citations and non-consecutive ones and everything. We don't need to worry about those numbers. And again, of course, you can put pinpoints in these ones as well. So If I want to pinpoint with Jones to page 95 or something like that, I just highlight the reference, edit, there's my Jones, and I'll put my pinpoint to page 95 this time, and that works. Sorry, the lights have gone out again. Hang on a second. And you'll see here we've got our pinpoint in that non-consecutive repeated citation back up to page 95 of Jones, and we can go back to footnote 2 to see what that actually is up in our footnote list. So that's a very nice feature, and this will work for all those different types of references. As we saw, you do have to make sure though that the reference is correct back in your Zotero library. So back here in our library, it is really worthwhile to make sure for everything, especially the ones you download off the web, that you have all these things in the right details. So I'll just show you how that connector works on a web page. So if we go to the library website, here's library, I'll go to the AGLC referencing guide. So referencing, AGLC guide. So this is where you can find out everything you need to know about AGLC. And I can use my little connector to save that to my library, AGLC guide. So now if I go back to my library in Zotero, I have a web page, the title AGLC guide. Now I don't probably want all that other rubbish in front of after the title, so I'm just going to call it AGLC guide. So you do have to do a little bit of editing. AGLC guide, there's no author, so I'm going to have an author. The website title, that's correct, it's UTS library. The update date is a bit weird here. I don't want the time as well, so I'm just going to go 15/07/15, and over here on just on the other side of this date box, it tells you what the year, the month, and the day is. 15th day of the 7th month, 2015. And we've got our URL there, which we also want for our web page. So now, if we go back to our document, we can cite that web page. Let's put another footnote in somewhere. Let's put it in there. Say, add AGLC guide web page. Okay. And so now we have a reference here to the AGLC guide at UTS library with that date of update and then our URL. Again, with web pages, pinpoints have to be in paragraph numbers. So if we wanted to reference, for example, scroll down a little bit. Let me scroll down, there we go. Say to this paragraph here, I'm going to call that paragraph maybe paragraph 2 because that's kind of the first paragraph there. You might argue and say it should be paragraph 3. Sometimes it's not exactly clear. I'm going to call it paragraph 2. Maybe I'll call it paragraph 3. Let's call it paragraph 3. So I go back to my Word document, I select the reference, I edit the web page inserted, and because it's a paragraph number, as with the medium neutral citation for the case, we put our square brackets around the number to indicate that it's a paragraph number pinpoint, and it goes where it should go in between the date information and our URL. Now, one thing that got left off here, which we need to fix, is that it doesn't show the web page, the website type in here, and it needs to say web page there because we're referencing a web page as opposed to something else. So if I go back to my AGLC, my Zotero library, there's a field here called website type, and that should say something. Generally, it will be a web page, but it might be some other type of internet site. Social media, for example, I think you'd use Twitter or something in there, or Facebook or whatever. So this is just a web page. So now if I go back to my document and refresh, now in our reference here, we've got web page plus the full date because there was one. You might not have a date at all, so that's okay. If there's no date, If there's no date, then you just leave that as it is. So you just have web page in brackets. Okay, so that's pretty much how Zotero works. Oh, sorry, the reference list. So if we want to have our reference list, we just use this add edit bibliography button up here. So here's all that. Once you've got all your references in the document, and you can do this as you go to, you can add more and then just click on here. So you know what happened there? You know why? Because I had my cursor somewhere down in my my list of references. You need to make sure, and I didn't then, remember to put your cursor in the document where you want the reference list to be appearing. So I'm just going to put my reference list down there. So that was because I had my cursor somewhere inside the list of footnotes, and obviously Zotero doesn't want to put a reference list down there. So click on here, and that will then create my reference list. It's ordered into categories, but it doesn't give you the names of the categories. So I've got my articles, books, reports. I've just got one of those. I've got my cases. I've got my legislation, and I've got my other, which generally web pages count as something other, but no category names. I have to put those in later, but you'll see this is all grayed out, and Zotero won't let you type anything inside these gray areas. So although I can type in my very first one, articles, books, reports, I can't type in any of the other ones. Books, reports, and if I could spell articles, that would be useful. So what we have to do, and this is kind of annoying, is we have to use this button here, unlink citations, to get rid of all the grey stuff, and then we can type in our category headings for those other categories. The problem with using that unlink button is that you can't then add any more citations to the document. So you have to be really, really sure that you've finished all of your referencing and that you don't have any more references to put into the document using Zotero, because once you've used that unlink, you can't add any more. So my advice to you would be just to save that Word document. I'm just going to save it onto my desktop somewhere. There we go. As my essay with links, Zotero links or something like that. That way, once we unlink it, then we haven't lost it. So now if I unlink it, unlink citations, see it says, are you sure you want to continue? It will stop it from updating anything. So I'll say yes. So now there's no grey stuff. So I can then add in my headings, cases. I'm just going to bold those so they look nicer. Legislation. Now, I don't have any treaties, so I don't need to put a heading for treaties. And I'm choosing not to add A, B, C, D. That's kind of your choice or your tutor's choice whether you need to add the A, B, C, D letters. I'm just going to not bother with them at this point. So there's my other. So articles, books, reports, cases, legislation. So Zotero automatically has already ordered these within those categories. So we don't need to worry about the order. It knows about alphabetical order by author surnames. You'll see it's reversed the first author's name there, as it should in the reference list. And it's got my cases, my legislation. And they'll all be in alphabetical order if you have lots of each of those different types of categories, different types of references in each of those different categories. So AGLC is really nice in that way. It fixes everything up for you. And so then you can print that off and hand that essay in as a lovely referenced article. If for some reason you notice a mistake at this point, you'll have to go, so you want to save this as a different name, right? Save as, on my desktop, essay without Zotero links. But if you notice a mistake, you'll have to trash that one, save, and go back to the one that's got the links, and edit that one again using Zotero and add more references in, and then create a new unlinked another version with those unlinked citations. So any mistakes here you have to correct in Zotero. I mean, you could also, if you felt like it, just manually with this unlinked one, you know, if it was a 4 instead of a 5 or something here, you could just do that and change it. So, but I think it is better practice to fix it up in your Zotero library if there's an error, and then trash this unlinked version, go back to your saved linked version, add or refresh, and then create a new unlinked one, which is then correct. The last thing with Zotero is backup. So the easiest way of backing up Zotero is to synchronize it with an online account. So if we go back into our preferences in Zotero, edit preferences in Windows, Zotero preferences in a Mac. We've been using our site preferences, but here we use our sync preferences. Now I've already got an account, so you won't see necessarily what I've got here. So this is my account details. You'll see create an account. So you want to create an account with Zotero. That allows you to then synchronize into the cloud your references. You want to sync automatically, sync the full text content, but you don't want to sync your files. So it is possible to add PDF files. Basically, if you want to add a PDF, you just get the PDF, drag and drop on top of the reference, the relevant reference in the library, and it then stores the PDF. And you'll be able to see those there. You can also do that directly if I've got the saved PDF, I can attach a link to a file that way too if I know where the PDF's been saved on my computer, so you can attach them. But you don't want to synchronize them because that uses up all your free space on Zotero. And if you add too many PDFs synchronizing them, you'll be eventually asked to pay some money to Zotero, which you may not want to do. So I'd recommend you untick those boxes. That way the references are synchronized, but unfortunately not the PDFs. So it is a good idea maybe to save them somewhere else, or maybe you can just find them again later. But if something terrible happens to the library, but at least then you've got the references synchronized so you can get them back if your laptop dies or something equally horrible happens to your Zotero library. So that's under sync. Okay, hi Hussein. I'm just going to switch screens in a minute. So I'll start off talking about the collections first, and then I'll go into the syncing, and then we'll finish up. So I'll just share screens and start. One other useful feature of Zotero is that you may have quite a lot of these citations eventually in your Zotero library, and you might want to group them together. And Zotero does that using what they call collections. And we go over here under this. So if we click on my library over here and right click, we get to make a new selection, a new collection, beg your pardon. So if we click on that, we give it a name. I might call it criminal or something like that. And okay. So now I have that collection, and I hear my library. I can just drag and drop various things over into that collection. And so now by clicking on the collection, I can see what's in it, and I can have lots of collections. I might have another one, international or something like that. Just make sure I spell that one right. And then, okay, so now I've got another collection, and I can just drag and drop various things into that other one as well. And one reference can be in as many different collections as you like. And you can also have sub-collections. So if I right click on a collection, I can make a new sub-collection. Maybe I can call it Australia. So then I have a sub-collection underneath my collection, and I can put some things in the sub-collection as well. So it's quite powerful. You can group these references together in lots of different ways. And as you might have seen when I right-clicked on these, you can delete or rename these collections and sub-collections as you go. So right-clicking just allows you to do various things. Create new ones. You can have as many as you like, include as much in them as you like. So it's quite a useful way of ordering and putting some kind of sensible structure into your Zotero library. Doesn't matter now, obviously, when I've only got 5 or 6 or 7, but once you've got 500 or 600, it does become quite useful to be able to categorize them in this way. But just remember that Zotero calls them collections, and you right-click on the library symbol to create a new collection, or on one of the already existing collections to create a sub-collection. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is backing up your Zotero library. So you can do, this is all on our desktop so far. So if something happens to your laptop or your computer or whatever, and you don't want to lose all this effort that you put into creating your beautiful Zotero library full of useful legal references. So we can synchronize with the online version of Zotero, and we do that under Edit and Preferences. So in a Mac it would be Zotero and Preferences. The Windows version here it's Edit and Preferences, which we've seen before this screen. So the site screen is where we've chosen our AGLC style, and we've had a look at our style preview and various other things. But now if we click on this Sync tab up on the top here, this allows us to create and then use our account. So I've already created one, so you won't see the same detail as I see because my account already exists. But you'll create an account, it doesn't cost anything, and you'll want to synchronize automatically and synchronize the full text content. You might have more than one library, but I recommend you just use one library and just synchronize that library. These two options here are usually ticked by default, but I recommend that you take the ticks away from them. The reason is that the free version of Zotero, this online storage area, is fairly limited, and if you synchronize with your attachment files, so which will normally be PDFs, you quite quickly can fill up the free online storage that Zotero offers, and then you'll start to have to be paying to have more storage and so on. So I'd recommend you don't synchronize your PDF files. The danger is that then you might have, they're on your computer, and if you lose your computer or it dies or something, then you lose those PDFs. But you might store them on some other drive as well, or make some other arrangement for keeping track of all those PDFs that you may attach to these references from time to time by dragging and dropping or in other ways. So you can do it at first, I suppose, until you get up to the freebie limit, and then you might take it away. So just be careful though, you don't want to get up to that. I think it's 300 megabytes. It's not a massive amount of storage space for Zotero. So I'd untick those for your synchronization. And then once you've set that up, I've got it to sync automatically, so that will just automatically synchronize with my account. You do also, if I right click over here, there's also a synchronize option there, so that'll synchronize as well. Obviously you have to be online to do that, but that synchronizes it so that you can then, for example, log onto another computer and open up Zotero and synchronize from that library as well. If you go into the library and put your preferences in, you can synchronize to different computers. So that's Zotero. I hope you enjoy using it. It's a great product. It's a little bit limited for complicated types of references, but with the standard sort of types that you would normally use, so this list here, for example, it works really, really well. And as we've seen, it works very well with Word as well. So I hope you enjoy Zotero. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen. So thanks again for joining us. If you do have any questions, please feel free to come to the library help desk on level 7, or we also have online chat, which you can get to through the help icon on our library homepage. And you can contact any of us in the business and law team for some help with Zotero as well. But do remember there's the online help on our library website. I might just share back to show you that again. So when we go to referencing, and you'll see, move across to referencing, if the library site is quick enough, you'll see there's a Zotero tab on that referencing page. So you might have seen the AGLC one as well. Down here we've got Zotero, AGLC, hopefully you've seen already Zotero, and you'll see then we've got a Zotero for Law tab, and a whole lot of other information about installing Zotero, setting up an account, and using it in various ways, which are common whether or not you're using it for law or for any other reason. Those are still relevant, and then some information about using it for law. basically referring to our intended user via PDF user guide. So do take advantage of that Zotero page, which sits on our referencing page, which sits on the library homepage. So thanks again for watching, and hope to see you soon in the library or possibly online. And good luck with using Zotero. Bye for now.